Welcome to the Story Takes Responsibility podcast, a show for companies, marketing teams, and founders looking to improve their storytelling through video. Make the process easier and feel more confident walking into their marketing plans. Our mission is to add value through our decade-plus experience in making video production more than just videos, but videos with objectives and partnerships with brands that value consistency. Our hope is that this podcast makes you more sustainable and budget-conscious in your marketing efforts. This show will inspire ideas and value, but most importantly, we want you to take action towards better storytelling.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show. Ross and Josh here from Mylan. As always, we've got another topic for you in this episode. This one, we're going to be talking about the emotion behind storytelling and what is emotional storytelling, right? Because I think you can look at storytelling in general and you can say, well, of course, there's going to be emotion attached to that. But then also, how does that translate into the commercial world? How does that translate into branding and marketing? And because I think there's a lot of ways that it can get muddied up relatively often. It's a lot of conversations we've had with clients over the years is a lot of the times I think people do tend to look at, okay, our marketing and our advertising. We need CTAs. We need something to get the clicks and things to get the signups to the newsletters. And more so, we need the sales and all that sort of stuff. And I think that it's easy to kind of get a tunnel vision of, well, the story we're telling is just about how great our brand is, how great our product is, when there's a lot left kind of to be uncovered there over, well, no, there's real emotion that can be tapped into within your company. In my opinion, I think there's emotion behind story with any company. I don't necessarily care what you do, right? That's a big portion as to why we've been pushing producing podcasts for companies and brands is that somebody could sit and be like, why does my company who does XYZ need a podcast? We're not necessarily built for that. Our story doesn't need something like that, when in all actuality, well, no, you don't know the value that your story has until you tell it. Yep. And so that's a big thing that we've been focusing on for years now, is to help brands uncover that story. Because again, it's very easy for a lot of people to look at that one single aspect of their quote unquote story, of their company, of their brand, and say, well, this is what we do, and this is how we do it. Let's dig a little bit deeper into that why you do it, which will translate into the how, but more so, what's the purpose that you're doing this with? Because I think there's value to be, kind of brought to light, have a light shed on of, well, hey, why'd you start the company in the first place? What problem were you trying to solve with this product or with building this team or this crew? Or why do you want the audience that you're trying to get with your brand and business? So of course, whether it's video, whether it's podcasting, stories can even be told through still photos and photography or design or anything like that. There's a ton of different ways to share different levels of emotion, which have different intentions, and how that can be shared through story. So I don't know where you want to begin with, but that's sort of my just kind of laying the groundwork here. And maybe my biggest point that maybe to lead off with is I've honestly kind of been amazed over the years at the amount of people that we will sit down for, let's just say the example of a story film. We'll sit someone down and we've got a series of questions, sure, but we're going to make it more conversational than anything. We're going to let, hey, these questions we've got here to kind of plant some seeds that'll then guide the rest of the conversation, because somebody always says something that's a little more interesting than what we, had planned for. So we're going to go off in that direction. Mm-hmm. But so many times we'll sit these people down. We'll begin with those questions. We'll ask them about, why did you start your company? What do you do? What's the story behind it? And more often than not, they often end up impressing themselves and saying, wait a second, hold on, I sound like that? Hold on, I said that way? There's so much value in uncovering that story because there's emotion there that even the people that are sharing the story aren't aware they had available to share. Yeah.
I mean, something you said right there is that's like the gift that we get to give. But I'm going to give an example just to kind of break it down, because it's like there's the what, there's the how, and there's the why. And this is totally from Simon Sinek's book, Start With Why. And this was kind of an unlock for me. And it's like so many businesses, if you look at their websites, they're playing it really safe. They're saying what they do and how they do it. This is feeding into the logical brain. It makes a ton of sense. If you look at our business, video production, how we do it, we have a 3-step process. If it ended there, no one would understand the why. And the why is we want to give confidence. We want to make this marketing thing less overwhelming. We want to give them direction. I call this like the anti-villain. This is the reward of working with us. So if we're looking at storytelling, like that's an emotional piece. It's like, what's keeping a business up at night? It's, oh my gosh, like I can't connect with the right people. This isn't working in my business. I truly believe storytelling, video production, marketing, that enhances storytelling. Fusing that with emotion is kind of the formula that we've landed on. How that kind of came to be was we'd work for other companies or we'd freelance on other sets, and like they'd be doing these really high-end, fancy-dancy, making it about, like the production and still doing and telling some good stories. I can't pretend like we invented this format, but we fell in love with this talking head piece. Do we like production? 100%. I love making something that's fancy, but more than anything, I think it's giving the gift of that confidence in the storytelling, but that starts on set. That starts with the way that we conduct these interviews. And we naturally gravitated towards talking head because I think you and I, we're making a podcast here. We love and we respect conversation. And we're good at prying in. We're good at asking the thing that's under the thing. I always say like it's finding the heart of a story. And a lot of times it's like, everyone has this practical. It's like, tell us about your company. And I might be like, we run this business and we're focused on making stories really great. And then a good follow-up question is like, but why do you do that? And it's like, well, I do that because it really, bothers me when I see companies that just aren't connecting with their audience the way that they want. And it makes me feel so much better when I'm able to help them see themselves in a better light, to give them confidence. That's a lot more compelling to anyone to hear. So it's like, it's giving them the permission when they're on set, making them comfortable first, but then giving them the permission to talk about their business or to talk about their process or to talk about their experience in a way that's significantly more vulnerable. That then leads into more transformation. So when we think about emotional storytelling, sure, some of these films that we've told, people literally cry. They're literally emotional, and it's powerful emotions. But it doesn't mean every film we make is about crying and making someone cry or anything like that. It's just really getting at the thing that's like, what's so significant? What's so special? How did you feel in that process? It's infusing feelings.
Emotions
That's what
can come
it
in
is.
many forms.
It can be good, it can be bad, it can be, just kind of something that's subtly better. But at the end of the day, like great storytelling, I'm always looking at a lot of businesses when it's like, you hear a lot of people is like, you need to position yourself as the expert or the authority. I agree, but I think the more powerful mechanism is positioning yourselves as the guide. And you guide people along the way to helping them solve the problem. No one wants to feel like, you're forcing something upon them or you're the savior to them. Someone wants someone to be like, I want to hire you and I want you to help me throughout this process. That's exactly what we do. If someone comes to me and says, we want you to solve our problems with video marketing, that's absolutely, the first thing we'll say is like, that's not how it works. This is a team effort. We want to guide you through the process of understanding better storytelling so that you understand how to do this in the future, whether you're working with us, whether you're working with someone else, whether you're just communicating to someone in general, whether you're making your own copy. It's making the whole ecosystem better, and it's infusing any storytelling mechanism with a little bit of emotion.
So going off of that a little bit, let's talk about kind of this quote-unquote coined term of ours, stylized films that connect.
Yeah.
Why do we say that? What exactly does that mean?
Yeah. So, like any company, it's like, okay, what is the thing that we really do? And how do I, bottle that up in like the least amount of words as possible? We have worked on several talking head film projects in the past. And I think for you and I, coming from the music video side of things, coming from weddings, like it's not any different one to the other. It's all storytelling. But we have all these production skills. Not that, anyone really cares about this necessarily, but our first legacy film that we did this amazing talking head piece, and we did something that was very conceptual and driven from like Orange is the New Black. So it symbolizes, and we put this production element into matching these stylized talking heads. I see a lot of people who are, especially in the corporate commercial side of things, like, let's just shoot, talking head stuff and then some simple process stuff. That gets the job done 100%. But if we can stylize it a little bit, if we can give it some extra style points, that content actually goes a lot further. So instead of saying, we're the most cinematic video production company, in Ohio, it's like the most important piece is connect. That's that emotional piece. We want to connect with your audience. That happens by understanding your audience, by understanding your objectives, and then applying a film type that makes the most sense to meet those objectives. The stylized portion is our production skill. It's those muscles that we have, but we don't lead with those. At the end of the day, that storytelling piece is first, and then let's make it look, badass in the process.
We can curse on this podcast?
I guess I just found out. Okay. I'm giving you permission.
Okay, I didn't know if we could say bad words on
Yeah,
this
we can
show.
say bad words.
So let's talk about kind of that emotional vulnerability a little bit, because I don't know if, I don't know. I think sometimes a lot of business owners, a lot of companies, whatever it may be, yes, they're ready to sit down and tell a story, but maybe they are focused a little bit more on that sales method, we really need people to have that call to action at the end of this piece, whatever it may be. Sometimes, it's not that difficult to get people to open up, but I don't know if people are necessarily thinking about that when they're sitting down to begin with. So let's talk about just the importance of that emotional vulnerability, because I also think that leads to honesty in marketing materials, which then leads to a better consistency overall in your marketing strategy in a campaign. Because if you're honest and you're open and you're vulnerable about why you're doing something, that's going to consistently show up across all different pieces of a campaign, which of course is going to then build better trust with your audience, and that all circles back into that emotional storytelling element. So let's talk about the vulnerability piece.
So we're going to dig into this more in marketing versus advertising in another episode, but it's goes hand in hand. I think it's not one or the other of like, oh, we got to go emotional, vulnerable storytelling, and then, there's call to action, sales driven, like action driven marketing pieces. I think you can actually do those simultaneously, but it's really important to make sure you're telling the authentic story and then having some, poignant questions that kind of point people in the direction of that CTA, that call to action. So a lot of times when we're doing this, it's like we're never delivering one piece of content. And this isn't about the campaign versus one-off project or anything like that. At the end of the day, it's consistency. It's figuring out what that story is and all those sort of things. So for me, when we're infusing some vulnerability or some honesty into a story, and we get asked this all the time, is like, how do you come up with your questions? We could have 7 questions on a piece of paper. You and I both know that it's the questions in between the questions that really get to that honesty and that vulnerability. And it's listening as much as it is being focused on what's next. So say you're trying to direct this project yourself. Biggest piece of advice that I think you or I would give is really listening when they give that answer and not being in such a rush to ask the next question.
Yeah.
And this is that heart piece. Is someone might say, tell us about your company and what you do. And I might hear something interesting in there and I'm like, I just kind of felt something in their voice. And we've been doing this for 10 years. So it's really comfortable for us to do this. And it's really comfortable, like something happened right there. I could tell there was like a glimmer. There was like some extra hope, some extra warmth in what they said.
Yeah.
So I'm like, can you tell me more about that? That was really interesting. And genuinely, you can't fake this. Mm-hmm. You genuinely have to be interested in what they're saying and be like, this might be a little off track. I'll even say that. I'm like, but I'm just genuinely curious right now. And a lot of the times, those are the questions that build out the framework of these edits. These questions that we start with, they're great for probing, prying, setting things up, giving someone a logical direction moving through this. But it's all these questions in between that almost always make our edit. One of the most powerful things that we always do is like, say we have this story film that we're doing, and it's like we've asked all these questions. I'm ignorant to your business. I only know what I know. I only know these questions that we kind of work through. One of the things that will happen that we kind of realized early on is like someone will get up and be like, oh, if only I had said this, like I had a thought afterwards. So we always try to keep like the tail end of these interviews open to like, listen, I just asked you a bunch of questions. I only know so much. The last thing I want to see happen is that you get up, you go walk away, and you have this great thought that I wish. So can you just take a moment? If there's anything you'd like to add, don't feel rushed. Take your time. I just love if there's anything else you'd like to add. I don't want you to walk away and like regret that you didn't get to say something. And almost every single time, I'll say 9 out of 10 times, I'll say 19 out of 20 times, the person has something amazing to say. It's like, you guys probably won't use this. It's like, nope. That is the one thing that I need to hear that was the most transformational, the most impactful, and the most important piece. So conducting these interviews, getting that emotional storytelling piece, it's not neglecting the logic, but it's realizing that the emotion comes first, making them feel comfortable, giving them the space to express themselves, and then letting them walk with that and not feeling so rushed. And this is a lot harder for me than you, because, I'm the time guy. I'm constantly like, I always say is like, if we can do an interview in 20 minutes or less, that's like great for the editor. But also I'm trying to keep in mind that like, once you go beyond 20 minutes in an interview, this is getting a little bit nerdy, people start to get fatigued. So it is keeping that conversation going, because when it goes too long, people do start to get tired. They don't start to give as good of answers, and it's like they're almost overwhelmed with this.
Well, I think this goes without saying, like, obviously with somebody like me, like I love sitting and talking to people, right? Yep. So if I'm sitting down to direct an interview, regardless of whether how interested or not I might be in their company or what they do or something, I'm interested to learn, right? I'm interested to learn about this person and why they do what they do, what their experience was like with this thing. And I think something that people overlook a lot, whether you like sitting down and talking to people for hours on end or not, is when you're doing something like an interview, like sitting down and like making sure you're prefacing what this interview is going to be, and also framing it less as an interview and more as a conversation. Like the amount of times that I will sit down when we're about to do a talking head piece and I'm directing it, I'm asking the questions, I always make sure to take a couple moments before we actually sit somebody down, because they're going to get nervous when they sit down. There's cameras, there's lights. Even if they're ready to talk, they're still like, oh, now it's real. And I can always usually notice that. So going over, having a moment that's honestly just one-on-one between them and myself, and just saying, hey, here's what we're going to do. Yes, I'm giving you the rundown of how I want to structure this, this interview so it goes smoothly. But more so, like, I just want you to know, like, I want this to be a conversation. When this is edited together, you're not going to hear my questions. You're not going to hear all that sort of stuff. This is all about you and what you're saying. But I want us to be talking back and forth. So don't feel like you have to cut yourself super short. Don't feel like you have to use the most proper of words ever. And so many times, the amount of time of just sitting down, taking that moment with this person and just saying, hey, we're just going to talk. I know there's some lights and cameras here. That's not normally how we would have a conversation, but we're just going to talk. And I need you to talk honestly and be a little vulnerable about the thing that we're going to talk about, whether it's going super deep and vulnerable or not. Just give me some honest answers and let's just have a conversation. There just happens to be cameras here. The amount of times that has eased the stress of the person in that chair, just by me taking that extra moment to talk to them, way more often than not, right? Very, very few times will someone sit down and be like, all right, I'm ready. I don't care. It always takes that little bit extra prep of just sitting and saying, oh, okay. Like the amount of times someone has said like, oh, cool. That's actually good to know that it's going to be more like a conversation than an interview. Because, I just feel interview. I feel like I'm in the hot seat. I feel like I'm just going to get a bunch of questions tossed my way. And even though, yes, that's the basis of what we're doing, it's a lot like you said, it's those questions in between the questions. And that, when you make it more of a conversational format, you allow there to be room and energy and time to sit and think of those other questions and talk about those other questions and get those other answers. To make it less of like hey, I'm in the director's chair, the camera's pointed at you, so I'm in control and I'm asking you the questions. And there isn't a control aspect. It's, hey, we're 50-50 in this. It's a two-way street, just like any conversation can be. We're sitting down and we're going to talk about you and how you're connected to the task at hand that we are talking about, whether it's a company, a product, a system, whatever it may be. That, I think, leading with just natural, as silly as this is to say, leading with just natural human emotion, especially in something like an interview or even something like B-roll, to be honest, like it just makes everything less weird for the people who aren't used to having a camera pointed at them, who, for somebody who isn't used to answering questions on camera with lights or even doing their job with a camera being pointed at them. That puts somebody on the spot. So I think like that's a huge way to really lean into, true emotional storytelling, is just let's get the emotion as naturally as we possibly can. Sure, we might say, hey, let's rephrase that a little bit in this way. Let's use these words maybe, but we're still basing it off of forming these emotions naturally. Yeah. Not sitting and fabricating something and not like, I've seen it, and to me it's a nitpick on my end that I can't stand, but I kind of hate seeing people when they sit and are doing an interview with somebody and they're telling them what to say. Yeah. Like, hey, I know you were about to say this, but I'm going to cut you off mid-sentence, and I want you to say it like this because I know that's what I'm looking for. Yeah. How about instead of that, let's see what they want to say, then let's reshape and remold that after they've completed their thought. Yeah. Because you don't even know where that thought was going. And you start to, psychologically, my big thing is you're starting to hurt their confidence. Exactly. Like, wow, what I was saying wasn't good enough. Right.
okay, if the artist in me is going to speak for a second, this is a side tangent. I love lights. I love camera. But at the end of the day, if the person in front of the camera, the talent, the actor, the person doesn't feel confident, doesn't feel comfortable, it's all for nothing. We have to make the person in that chair feel comfortable. And if we're doing things that erode trust, that erode confidence, there's no way a good story is going to come out of that. And it's going to start to feel inauthentic or robotic or forced. And you might have this beautiful beginning section, and then even though they say the exact right things, they say it with the wrong feeling, the wrong like cadence. It's like something's off there.
This business changed my life.
And here's the thing too, is like, I want to bring back in the CTA thing, and I want to use an example of emotional storytelling in that. A lot of people call bullshit. You know, if you're hearing that, it's like, call now, get your quote. No one likes being advertised to.
Right.
So this is where emotional storytelling actually becomes really powerful in this. Problem solution. So popular. Imagine the interview is like, hey, you know, like, tell me a little bit about maybe the biggest hurdle that you have in your business. How do you guys remove the hesitation to kind of follow that up? That's a really powerful one. It's like you're introducing a problem and the way that you guys get past that. So let's use Tyler in the Stance film as an example. It's like, okay, what does he really want? He wants his clients to feel like friends. He treats all of them as friends. So he has all this passion, love, and care for his craft. When we were mapping out that story, a lot of like what we have the full film, which is this beautiful thing that'll land on a website, and it's going to be this legacy piece that if he scales up, if he brings in new customers, or if people are just curious, they can go look at that thing, they can get a good sense, and they can fall in love with his brand. But the cut downs that we created that can be turned into ads, they're really kind of talking about like the client journey, the client experience, the way that he wants someone to feel when hiring his business. Sure, there's no CTA in terms of like, call my business now, ask for a quote now, but very easily you could have this wonderful thing that clicks with someone that's interested in woodworking or purchasing something like that. And they say, that person really cares about this, and they care about their client, and they care about the people. And it's just like, I just feel something for this person, and I do want to get a gift, or I do want to get, you know, a table made, or whatever the case may be. And it's like, it's easy to redirect that link to a quote page. And it's not hitting someone over the head, because we all call bullshit as soon as we're like overwhelmed with like, you're trying to force me to do something. No one's going to force me to do something other than me. And I might not even be able to force me to do something. So let's just lead them there. Let's make it a little bit more of like a poetic journey, which sounds a little bit heady, but it's like really at the end of the day, in any business, there are all the hurdles to someone making a decision to purchase or acquire your service or your product or anything like that. How do you in your business help to remove that hesitation? That's what they need to hear. You could lead with that and say that, and you're really infusing an idea of like, wow, that is kind of like, you know, I've hired for this service or this thing in the past and I've hated this. That's a different way to think about it. That's all it is. That's all emotional storytelling is. And that's how you get into both this, you know, loftier side, but then also turning that into a call to action, a more focused and advertisement versus general marketing.
Yeah. Okay, so let's wrap this one up. Any final thoughts? Any big things you feel like we haven't covered when it comes to emotional storytelling? Maybe things that people do wrong or things that people don't look for. Maybe they overlook it in their process, getting ready for a production or making a production happen. How do they overlook the emotion side of storytelling? You know, we look at storytelling, we're like, storytelling is naturally emotional, but there's very easy ways to make it very robotic, unnatural, all that sort of stuff. So any final closing thoughts here before we say goodbye?
I think we hit all the points the way that I would want to hit it. I just think, in general, emotional storytelling can sometimes be hard for people to wrap their heads around it, because a lot of times when they think about marketing or production or objectives, it's like they already kind of have in mind the logical thinking first. And it's like, if you just think about the way that you make purchase decisions and then start to get creative about your marketing efforts that way, it's like, wait, how might I be able to introduce someone in a way that's a little more human, a little bit, I mean, the reality is like when you're taking someone, you know, I'll use the example of going from completely cold. Maybe you need to build awareness. It's like if the first thing you're saying to them is buy my product, that is so off-putting. Think about it like dating. You know, if you're married or if you have a significant other, it's like you don't just go up to someone that you've never met and say, I think I should date you. You strike up a conversation, and it's just like, hey, I'm just curious. I'm just having a conversation. There might not be any interest of dating them, but then you're just like, something's magnetic about this. I want to pursue a little bit more. Maybe we just go on a casual date and or a meeting to get to know each other. Then it turns into like, I'd really like to date you and I'd like to be around you a little bit more often. And then it's like, you know what? I have to marry you. That's kind of this evolution from cold to warm to hot to customer.
Dating is date your customers, folks. That's the biggest.
Date your customers. That's the takeaway.
That is not the takeaway. The takeaway is that there's emotional value to be found in all forms of storytelling. Many forms of storytelling that we always talk about and cover and uncover here on this show. So that is another episode. He's been Josh. I've been Ross from Milan. And remember, just as much as storytelling has emotional elements to it, right? Storytelling, it takes emotion. What else does it take?
It takes responsibility.
That's right.
Thanks for joining us on another episode. If you found this episode helpful, share it with a friend, rate and like, and all the things we're supposed to tell you to do. If you want more storytelling tips and perspectives from the Milan team, please join our newsletter and visit the website at myelin.company. That's MYELIN.company. Additionally, if you need help in your video marketing or want to learn more about our method, please feel free to book a discovery call with our team or email josh@jcp.co. This podcast wouldn't be possible without all the great companies that trust us, challenge our way of thinking, and offer amazing feedback. We love to add value to other companies, leaders, and productions. Being a part of that journey is an honor. This has been the Milan Video Production Podcast. Story takes responsibility. Until next time.